Philanthropist George Soros's philanthropic war chest sits at $18 billion after a series of gifts he made over the past 2 years, placing his Open Society Foundation second in terms of assets among private grant makers, behind only the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The assets represent a huge opportunity for progressive advocacy groups favored by Mr. Soros, a Jewish native of Hungary who survived the Nazi occupation and escaped the communist takeover and made a fortune as a hedge fund manager. Since getting involved in philanthropy in the late 1970s, Mr. Soros has supported marginalized populations, Europe's Roma ethnic group, the establishment of democratic governments around the world, and a variety of social justice efforts that progressives champion. Over the past several years, Mr. Soros has shifted assets from Soros Fund Management, his hedge fund, to the Open Society Foundations, a network of grant makers and other organizations he created, according to Laura Silber, a spokeswoman for Open Society Foundations, who confirmed the $18 billion figure. From 2010 to 2015, Mr. Soros contributed $732 million to Open Society Foundations, according to Chronicle data, so the $18 billion announcement suggests a dramatic escalation in his philanthropic efforts during the past 2 years. The money sustains the foundation over quite some time at a significant scale, said Carl Lammerch, president of Democracy Alliance, a group of liberal donors. Mr. Lammerch, who previously served as director of U.S. programs for Open Society Foundations, said the increased assets, which were first reported by the Wall Street Journal, were a positive development for liberal causes and social justice philanthropy. Sending a message. While the Open Society Foundations wouldn't disclose any plans for the new reserves, the money sends a strong message, said Benjamin Soskis, research associate at the Urban Institute Center on Nonprofits and Philanthropy. Since President Trump's election last year, Mr. Soros and his organizations have poured millions into groups, such as the AFCLU, that have pushed back against policies emanating from the White House. In a moment at which civil society globally is under immense assault, this is a gesture that shows there is some guarantee that his resources are going to be available to stem the tide, said Mr. Soskis, a Chronicle contributor. It must offer a bit of reassurance to people in the field, he said. Mr. Soskis said the shift of assets was an indication that the network was ready for a leadership transition. Chris Stone took the top job in 2012 to organize a sprawling and messy network, according to Mr. Soskis. The recent cash infusion, he said, is a show of support for Patrick Gaspard, a vice president who has been tapped to step up to acting president at the end of the year. Mr. Gaspard previously served as President Obama's ambassador to South Africa. It's a vote of confidence in the organization, Mr. Soskis said. Payout requirements. 2 of the largest organizations in Mr. Soros's philanthropic network, the Foundation to Promote an Open Society and the Open Society Institute, are private grant makers. Federal laws require that private foundations pay out at least 5% of their assets each year, which would amount to about $900 million annually if all of the $18 billion were moved into private U.S. foundations. However, the way foundations can account for their payout makes it difficult to get an exact number, and Open Society did not provide any details on how the $18 billion was distributed among Mr. Soros's various philanthropic enterprises. Historically, his foundations have spent their funds far faster than federal law has required, with Mr. Soros replenishing those funds annually.